Hey guys, it's Thorn. I have pink hair. I'm at Free Spirit Gathering in Darlington, Maryland, and anyway, I'm sitting here. I like to get up early and come. There's a picnic table kind of in the middle of the field under a tree, and I like to sit here and journal and drink coffee. And anyway, I've had a lot on my mind. I thought I'd make a video. So I'm actually one of the headlining presenters at Free Spirit Gathering this year, which is super fucking weird because Free Spirit was my first festival. I think of this as my home festival. It was a little weird being asked, and then it was weird when we were talking about presenter fees. I was kind of like, dude, just make sure I don't starve to death over the course of the week. These people are my family and they're close friends, and I've just been coming here for close to a decade now, and of course I'm happy to be involved. So it's really strange. So I'm struggling a little bit with, as the book kind of comes out, and just in the last year, I've been writing a lot more. I'm doing stuff for Llewellyn's annuals, the calendar and that kind of stuff, and I'm dealing with the imposter syndrome stuff, which I think is really normal. When I was working at the university and kind of doing the scholarly thing, this is like a hallmark of being an academic is oh God, when is everybody at the conference going to realize that I'm just a big idiot and they shouldn't be listening to me? I know I'm talking to a friend of mine right now who's working on a book, and he's kind of oh God, this next year is going to be really tricky because it's going to be the same sort of thing, imposter syndrome. And the way I've kind of dealt with that, I try to be really careful first off about not setting myself up as an expert to begin with. One of the things that I love the most about healthy pagan communities is that these are places where we all come together and we can learn from each other. We don't have an established authority. We don't have a hierarchy that runs consistently throughout our groups. You go to Pagan Pride Day and nobody there is practicing the same religion. We're kind of just a hodgepodge of whatever under this umbrella of paganism. And the same thing is true at festivals. Everybody's path is so different. You can be an expert on particular magical practices. You can be an expert on pieces of history. There are things that we have experts, okay? But I think it's a lot healthier to think of the space as one where, with sharing. When I do workshops, I really try to do them as discussions rather than lectures, where it's hey, this is the thing we're talking about, and this is how I've dealt with it. What suggestions do you guys have? And then we can go around and we can talk about it. I find that to be a lot more effective. And it's good for the imposter syndrome stuff, because I think once, when you've really internalized this idea that you're not an expert and people shouldn't expect you to be an expert, then it's harder to feel like an imposter, because I try really only ever to talk about my personal experiences and kind of what's on my mind, and I try to be really open to having my mind changed. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see kind of what, sorry, I have a hair in my face. It'll be interesting to see kind of what mental shifts I go through when the book is out, and there'll be reviews floating around, and you can't control how people read things or what people think or whatever. And I know we'll just see. We'll see what people get out of it. I tried really hard to not be have that kind of violent sort of authority where this is how things are done, just because I don't actually think that. So hopefully that comes across. But being a writer, putting out a book doesn't mean that you're an expert witch. Hopefully it means that you're a good writer, if not an expert writer. But people who write books have really only demonstrated that they're good at writing books. Like, that's a different skill from being a pagan or being a witch or being any kind of magician. Like, my ability to like get a book deal and write a book and follow through has a lot more to say about my ability to like follow deadlines and follow through on work I commit to than it does anything about my magical practice. Like, if you're organized and you can write and you know how to keep a calendar and you're really tight with your planner, you can write a book, okay? Doesn't mean it's going to be like a good book, but like, that's a different skill. And I think in paganism, because we don't have like, our leaders are writers. Like, we don't have kind of like this like papal hierarchy to look up to. So the people we look up to are the people who are producing materials, and for the most part that means books. So like, our authorities, our celebrities, our big name pagans are almost exclusively writers. And I think kind of because that's true, it's really easy to forget that like being a writer is a different skill. And it doesn't mean that there aren't a bajillion really skilled, like amazing witches out there who just aren't writing books because writing books is not a thing that they do. And it also, like, it doesn't mean that the people putting out books are necessarily like the witches that you need to be listening to. Same thing being at a festival and presenting. Like, the people who present, for the most part, like, their inclinations go towards talking to people, like being social and presenting. Like, those are their own skills. It doesn't mean that they're the only people worth listening to. It doesn't even mean that they're the best people worth listening to. And I think when we remember those things, and as presenters and as writers, like, if we like remind people of that periodically, like that's what kind of gets me through when I'm having those moments where I'm like, oh God, when is everybody here going to realize that I'm just a raging moron? Like, and that's kind of what gets me through those moments, is just like, I'm not talking about being self-deprecating. Like, you don't want to be self-deprecating necessarily, but just pointing out that, hey, like, I'm presenting here because like, I can write workshop proposals, and like, I know how to talk to people, and I know how to like guide conversations. And a lot of that has a lot more to do with me being a teacher than it does me being a witch. Like, working in a classroom, like lecturing at a university, like, I learned how to interact with people. But it's really tricky because I'm super duper introverted. So like, that's its own skill set, and it has nothing to do with how effective my magic is or how committed I am to the gods. So anyway, like, that's kind of what I'm journaling about and thinking about over here. It's a weird thing because Free Spirit is my home festival. Like, I know everybody here, so I don't run into that kind of stuff so much, just because people know who I am, and like, I'm just a person here, and these are my buddies. But I've definitely had moments where I've been out at other kinds of pagan events, and like, people sometimes like fangirl a little bit, like just like a little bit, and mostly like, you know, once I like trip over myself or like walk into a tree or something, like the illusion sort of vanishes. But I don't know, like, I think everybody has something really important to contribute, even just like being a member of a community and kind of like helping it grow and facilitating that community. Like, that's just as valuable as somebody who produces a book or like makes YouTube videos or presents workshops. Like, sometimes we forget the celebrity thing is a little bit weird, and I do it too, right? Like, I totally fangirled all over Selena Fox on a plane last year. Like, yeah. I definitely have people who I really, really admire. Like, Christopher Penczak tweeted at me yesterday, and like, I've had conversations with this man face to face, and I'm still just like, ah, right? Like, I still flip out over Silva Ravenwolf. Like I get it, which is why it's so weird if even like the tiniest inkling of that happens to me. But anyway, these are all different skills, and people have different combinations of those skills, and I think sometimes we favor some over others, which is a shame. But yeah, putting out a book doesn't make you an expert. It just makes you, hopefully, a good writer. Putting on a workshop doesn't make you like the boss of other people. It just means that you're hopefully good at talking and getting information across, or at least facilitating discussion. It doesn't make you a better witch. I think sometimes we forget stuff like that. So anyway, hope you guys are well, and bye.